All right. This ain't just a show. This is a platform. Veteran built, battle tested. Welcome to the Misfit Nation. Yeah! Mic in the room, built from boots on the ground, now we breaking the rules. 2 vets, 1 leader, painting the sound, turn scars into sermons, let them echo around. Authors with truth, musicians with fire, actors backstage chasing something higher. Entrepreneurs bleeding just to get ahead. If you fought for your dream, yeah, you are what you said. If they told you no, if you still came back, if you fell to your knees but you stayed on track, this is your voice, this is your flame. Say it loud, remember the name. No salvation, just elevation. We rise again. From the fight to the end. We are the Misfit Nation. No damn labels, no damn cages. If you're still breathing, you belong. Turn it up. This is our song. Yeah. This is our song. Yeah. Veterans standing with ghosts in the chest. First responders running in while the world second guess. Gold star names carved deep in the soul. Your story ain't over, we carry the whole. Coaches teaching mindset, breaking the chains, turning barely alive into owning the pain. Truth over polish, scars on display. If it's real, let it bleed. That's the misfit play. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. It's Aubrey right now. We're the more than you know. Don't walk alone. Veterans press 1, bring it home. Don't trade forever for tonight. You're still needed in this fight. We are the Misfit Nation, built from scars and dedication. We rise again. From the fight to the end. We are the Misfit Nation. Every voice is fabrication. From the silence to the scream, we're strong. Welcome home, you belong. You belong. You belong. Oh wait, you. Oh wait,
Woo!
you belong.
Misfit Nation, welcome back to the Sunday after dinner edition. I know you have other things you could be doing right now, but you chose to ride with us, get those frequent flyer miles, and hang out with us on the Misfit Nation tonight. I know the studio looks different. I'm in the land of my birth. I'm in New Jersey right now. I'm hanging out at the hotel for tomorrow's day with my dad and doing some visiting around the city of my birth, Jersey City, taking pictures, doing some B-roll, and doing those things that you do when you're trying to make sure you keep the memories alive of everything you had and everything you've done in life. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I'd like to take a moment and to recognize an important anniversary of the British generation. Yesterday marked June 6th, D-Day, the day in 1944 when thousands of brave Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. Many knew the odds, many knew the cost, yet they moved forward anyway, driven by duty, courage, and a belief that something greater than themselves was worth fighting for. This sacrifice reminds us that freedom is never free. It is earned through resilience, through service, and through the willingness to confront overwhelming obstacles head on. And that's here at the Misfit Nation, we honor that spirit, not only on the battlefields abroad, but also in the personal battles fought every day. The battles against addiction, against trauma, against self-doubt, against the voices that tell us we're too broken, too far gone, beyond redemption. Today's guest knows those battles intimately. Joe Potosi is a United States Navy veteran. He's an author and a living example of what can happen when a person refuses to surrender to their circumstances. His journey has taken him through addiction, pain, loss, and some of life's darkest moments. But instead of allowing those struggles to define him, Joe chose to confront them, learn from them, and ultimately transform them into a message of hope for others. Through his books, Unshackled, A Story of Redemption, and Renewal, and When the Dust Settled, Joe shared an honest and powerful story of accountability, resilience, and rebuilding a life with purpose. His message is one that resonates deeply with our Misfit Nation family. Your condition does not have to be your conclusion. Tonight, we're going beyond the headlines and beyond the books. We're talking about the battles that happen after the uniform comes off, after the mistakes are made, and after life kicks you in the chest and knocks you down. We're talking about redemption. We're talking about renewal. We're talking about what it truly means to fight your way back. Misfit Nation, help me welcome Navy veteran, author, survivor, and brother in service, Joe Potosi. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much, Rich, for that wonderful introduction. This is an honor and a privilege to be here with you.
It's great to have you, Joe. It's always great to have a fellow veteran on the show and one that's willing to share their story. Like yours is a very roller coaster life, like a lot of us have as we come out of the military. We had that roller coaster of ups and downs and oh my gods that come through. Your story is going to be one that resonates with the Misfit Nation, as I said in the intro. And I believe you saying it will be better than me saying it. So if you don't mind, tell us what led you to the Navy, what you did in the Navy, and then what happened after.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again. So I grew up in an extremely physically and mentally abusive home for 15 years. My biological father abandoned the family when I was 3. And so I endured a lot of the abuse, me and my sister, neglect. And after a certain point in time, I decided I needed to do something after high school. So I joined the Navy in the late entry, 363 days.
Wow.
You can do up to 365 days, but I was on a mission, right? I had to get out. I had to get away, try to have some type of life. So you might have heard this adage, you can run, but you can't hide. So when I went to boot camp in January, in Chicago, freezing cold, obviously. What the drill instructors did not see was the huge backpack I was carrying over my shoulders of emotional baggage, PTSD, depression, anxiety. You've heard the adage, you can run, but you can't hide. I was running from one situation, trying to better my life. But as I went through boot camp and A school down in Memphis, Tennessee, I still had all this emotional baggage that I did not know how to deal with. Boot camp was a cakewalk. The hardest part about boot camp for me was I had to have a root canal. Not a root canal, wisdom teeth. I had 2 wisdom teeth removed while in boot camp. And that was kind of a low spot. And I failed one of my bunk inspections, the first one. So their idea was to send all of us guys to IT for intensive training, just to thrash us for an hour and a half. And my whole attitude was like, that's all you got? I mean, the drill instructors could never do or say anything to me that wasn't done to me, but worse, by my mom or my stepdad. So I went to school, and that's when I discovered alcohol. I discovered when I would drink, it would numb the pain I was carrying. I was drowning in a sea of despair, hopelessness. And when I would consume alcohol, it would dissipate for only a little while, but it was always there the next day. So that pattern continued. After school, I was stationed on the USS Kitty Hawk out of San Diego. and I was assigned to the V4 division. So I was what is known as a grape. I was the guy that worked on the flight deck. I refueled the aircraft, defueled the aircraft. Really a dangerous job. And it was there in that time I started doing a lot of soul searching, and I was looking for some answers because as a child I grew up in church. Church was a way for me to get out of the house, to get away from the bully on the block, which was my mom and stepdad. It was like it was an escape. But over time I kept hearing this story about this guy named Jesus, and all you have to do is put your trust in him. I couldn't trust my own parents. How can I trust in this guy I couldn't see, feel, or touch? So fast forward, I'm in the Navy. I'm soul searching, and I'm confronted by a couple of Buddhists that invite me to one of their services. So I decided to go, and I'm looking for answers. I'm trying to find peace of mind. I'm trying to find answers to life. I'm trying to get out of the rut that I'm in. That was not the journey I stayed on. It wasn't long before I realized that it went counter to what I believed to be the truth about God creating the universe because of the sin of mankind, the fall of man, and the sinfulness, Christ dying and resurrecting on the third day. These are the things I had up here in my head, but I didn't have them in my heart. I didn't believe it. I had the head knowledge. So anyway, right around the same time, I'm still carrying this PTSD, and one of my good friends was killed on the ship. And that kind of thing happens all the time in life and in the middle. But what really bothered me the most was the fact that my buddy, he was killed, and it was the Navy's fault. They launched an aircraft on a red light and killed him instantly. His body got jettisoned into the ocean off the coast of San Diego. They never found his body. And they kept saying it was his fault. And that sent me on a downhill spiral. My drinking intensified. Up until the point I thought I can do 20 years, get out relatively young and, maybe start a family or whatever. But after that episode, it's just, I was really bitter, really angry, really upset. I could not believe how the Navy lied to try to cover their own asses, so to speak. There was this idea that we believe, and that is all the enlisted individuals, such as myself, we took we would take the heat for stuff that would happen. Officers were untouchable for the most part. They got away with a lot of stuff, and in my opinion, in this scenario, that's what happened. So eventually, I came home on leave. I was still living this vicious cycle of drinking as much as I could, trying to save money as the best I could. When I got out of active duty, I still had a reserve commitment, Navy reserves. I was obliged to fulfill. But I got out of the Navy, came back to my hometown, Rockford, Illinois, and I bought a duplex. And the reason I bought this duplex was because my mother and brothers, my 4 brothers, were living upstairs. And my mom, she had left my stepdad, and they had moved like 5 times in 4 years, right? So I wanted to have some stability for my younger brothers. We lived in the projects as young kids, where we grew up extremely poor on government cheese, powdered milk. We were just really poor. Didn't have much. So I bought this duplex with the intention my brothers have a solid place to stay. They'll have to move every few months, and they can focus on their schoolwork and what they want to do after school. Well, because of my poor choices, because of my continued use of alcohol as a crutch, eventually over time, I lost my job at the airport. I worked at the Rockford Airport, doing a lot of the same things I did in the Navy. And over a period of time, I lost my house. And as you can imagine, that was a really tough pill to swallow, right? And to make matters worse, to go to one of your buddies and say, "Hey, man, I need a couch to lay on just for a little while." And so I was couch surfing for a little bit, getting back on my feet. Got back to work, got a car, got another place. Then I was in a terrible car accident. The brakes went out of the car, and to avoid hitting all these kids playing in the street, I intentionally aimed the car for a utility pole. Now you say, why would I do that? It was I don't know if you remember the Grand Prix, the 79s, big Grand Prix. I had a black Grand Prix with red interior. I didn't have a seatbelt. So what happened was, and I share most of the story in the book. There's a few things I didn't share. But essentially what happened was I was going downhill. When I realized my brakes were out, I couldn't turn off anywhere. And in my panic, I threw it in the park. And I remember I have milliseconds to do something here. I threw the car in park thinking it would stop. The transmission dropped out and it started going faster. And as I got to the bottom of the hill, all these kids were right in front of me. I started honking my horn, having the kids, the kids scattered for the most part. And I aimed for the pole, but at the very last instant, I don't want to go through the windshield, so I bailed. And when I bailed, I broke my back, broke my wrist.
Oh, man. Wow.
And you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what happened at that point, I just started working at the bakery. At that time, it was a good job. I couldn't keep my apartment. I was going to be laid up for 4 to 5 months. So I stayed at my mom's, paid her rent. And during this time, I was laying off the booze. Eventually, I got back to work at the bakery, found an apartment real close to where my mom lived because I had a couple dogs that I couldn't keep at my rental property. So I kept them at my mom's house. So it worked out. It was convenient. So I was back to work for a little while, and I had a buddy that needed a place to stay. I took him in, and we helped each other out, and things were going good. And then I got laid off. And, being without a job, not knowing how I'm going to pay my bills. And although I had a decent job at the bakery, because up until that point, I got into a lot of debt, right? And so I was pretty much in a black hole. And I decided to move to Dubuque, Iowa, where my mother and father are from and my extended family. And I have a history here. I would come here a lot in the summers as a young kid. And we lived here 2 different times for short periods of time. So I decided, you know what? I need to go to Dubuque, start over. So that's what I did. I stayed with my cousin Libby for about a month or so, and I got a job right away working at the bakery in Dubuque, Met's Bakery. And since I knew a lot of the jobs already, they picked me up quick and they gave me a good wage and all that. And wasn't long after that, I met my present wife. But during this whole time, in spite of everything I lost, I continued to drink. It was like I was rewarding myself. I moved out of the state. I got a new job. Things are coming together. I deserve a drink. But, I would drink in a social setting, but I never drank socially. I always drank to get drunk. I'm being honest. I always wanted to get a buzz, help me forget about the pain that I was all these years carrying, all this trauma. And you see, maybe you don't understand this, Rich, but my mother and my stepfather were still renting space in my mind, rent-free, years after the fact, years after being separated. They're doing their own thing, high on life. My stepdad especially, I'm not a thought in their minds, but yet here I am, a prisoner with those two people in my mind, and I couldn't shake it. And, that whole thing about being insane. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, that's what I was doing. So eventually what happened was me and my girlfriend at the time, we got more serious. We got married, but my drinking continued. And she gave me an ultimatum. She goes, look, it's either the alcohol or me. You can't have both. So it was at that point I started going to AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. And it wasn't long for me to realize that I needed something more structured than just a meeting once a week on a Saturday. So I did a little research, and I decided to turn myself in. I decided to admit myself to an outpatient treatment center in downtown. So I went through this treatment center, and it was at this point the veils on my eyes were beginning to lift. I was beginning to understand the workings of the alcoholic mind. And it's not a drinking disease, it's a thinking disease. And I started to obtain tools I needed to use in everyday life in order for me to abstain from alcohol. Because to say it a different way, Rich, I'm allergic. And when I partake of alcohol, there's side effects. Just like a person who gets stung by a bee, they can die from that, right? They're allergic. And that became my mindset. So it was not long after that, my soul started to stir. I was uneasy about my position in the world in terms of me and God, like where I stood. And as I mentioned before, I had the head knowledge. A minister would recite a Bible verse when I was a kid. I had a spiral notebook. I would write down that verse and memorize it. I might not know what it means, but I'd memorize that verse because I discovered by meditating on these positive things, it took my mind out of the gutter, so to speak. Right? So anyway, we were married for a few months, and I asked my wife if she would join me at a Wednesday night Bible study. She agreed. So we started going to the Wednesday night Bible study, and it was during this time we met other young couples with kids, husbands and wives, godly men, godly women, and we developed friendships and friendships to this day. And wasn't long after that, it was Easter. The following year, we went to the Easter service because it was something I always did as a kid, and I wanted to do it. And I had heard the gospel message over 1,000 times easily. But as I mentioned earlier as well, I could not trust. Trust was I need to back up and say this thing too, Rich. And maybe you can understand this. So I mentioned I couldn't trust my parents. There was only a handful of extended family members I really trusted. And other than my siblings, I didn't trust anybody, right? And even as an adult, trust was a huge thing. However, when I went to the military, I trusted my fellow sailors 100% because I knew they loved our country as much as I did, and I knew they had my back and I had theirs. And so I think the trust process for me started when I was in the military. Little baby steps, right? So anyway, going back to the Easter Sunday, I put my trust in Christ, and it was like 1,000,000 pounds lifted off my chest. And I'll never forget what the pastor said in closing. He made a reference out of the book of John, chapter 1, where Jesus said to those that come to him, he gives us the right to become sons and daughters. Now you might say, well, what's the big deal about that verse? Well, I'll tell you why, what the big deal is. As a child, my mother and stepfather, especially my stepfather, would always threaten to get rid of me. They're going to throw me away. They're going to see if somebody will take me. And you say, why? Well, because the day my biological father left, I was the second oldest child. My mother had a brand new baby boy, and she was pregnant with her fourth child. Me and my sister knew our father, but my younger siblings did not. So I would frequently ask, when's he coming back? When's dad coming home? Because he was my hero, right? And that I became a thorn in their side. And, they would frequently say, we're going to get rid of you. We're going to throw you away, whatever. And so when I heard this passage on this Easter Sunday, it just resonated with me, if that makes sense. He adopted me into his family, not by anything I've done, but by works. Not by my works, but my faith in him. So anyway, it wasn't long after that I continued to go to AA. I wrapped up my outpatient treatment, and I began meeting with the pastor from the church, and I continued to work on myself. I continued to work through those issues that been holding me back all these years, right? And it was really maybe not a traditional therapy session, what you might think of, but through those sessions, I went a long way. I made a lot of progress, and I got very involved with volunteer work within the church, outside of the church, and I began to try to make a difference in the world in which I live, including, I know, thanks to people like Stephen King, clowns freak people out, right? For the most part. Well, back in those days, I created a clown ministry. I was GD the clown, and we would go to the county fairs and different places, and I would make animal balloons and the wordless book, the wordless bracelet, and just invest in these young people's lives, these young kids' lives. I volunteered at the nursing home for 14 years, and the county jail, the halfway house. I was doing whatever I could to make a difference. Because at the end of the day, is what I realized today, and I realized back then, your condition does not have to be your conclusion. And what was my condition? I mean, I was homeless, I was helpless, I was hopeless. I had no direction in my life. When I mentioned before, when I came to Dubuque, I found a job, I found a wife, I had a wage, I had nourishment, food, and water, but none of those things could fill this void that was still missing in my heart. It's the best way I can describe it. Money couldn't fill it. Sex couldn't fill it. Alcohol was a non-issue at this point. Food couldn't fill it. Other relationships couldn't fill it. But you know what filled it was my relationship with God through Jesus Christ. When I put my trust in him, that emptiness, that void left. It's no longer there. And so some years ago when I wrote the first book, when the dust settled, this book, I never dreamed I was going to write a book, okay? But it was an extension of my ministry. I want to help other people to let them know that, if you never heal from past trauma, you will bleed on those who never cut you. And I alluded to this before. Your condition does not have to be your conclusion. I mentioned before about being homeless, about the car accident. If you fall down 5 times, get up 6. I didn't stay broken. I didn't stay jobless. I didn't stay homeless. So we all have choices to make. Do you agree with that, Rich? I can't hear you.
Absolutely. 100%. Every choice we make as humans has a third order effect in our lives. So for you, all those things that were happening as a child, all the systemic abuse, systemic trauma that you were given, all those choices that your stepdad and your mom made at that point had third and fourth order effects on you in life. So
Right.
you did things along the way with the drinking, with trying to find escapes to get away from it, to get the noise out of your head. You
Right.
found the brotherhood in the Navy when you were a grape. When you said grape, I wanted to laugh so hard. But on the Kitty Hawk, and you were in Millington, Tennessee at the Naval Air Station, Memphis, a
Yep.
beautiful base down there. Did the Navy 10 nautical miler there, that's when I learned what a nautical mile was. It's not the same as regular miles, and you can run for a long time to try to get that 10. but you have to have faith. And that's what you found along the way as well, that faith is stronger than anything that can get you through things. And although I'm not a prognosticator, I'm not a pastor, I'm not a philosopher, but I do believe that that higher power does get us through things. And I believe that's what you have done through all your ministries, through finding your path. And then, of course, you said the Stephen King thing. I think everyone in the audience probably had a chuckle about the being afraid of clowns now. Some are afraid to go to pet cemeteries now because they think some animal's going to come at them. So there's all kinds of things that affect us all. But every choice we make in life has that third order effect. And we have to understand that those demons that we create when we make that choice, we have to deal with them ourselves in order to stop the madness and keep it going. And you also mentioned the 79 Grand Prix. I had a 79 Monte Carlo, which is the sister car of the Grand Prix. So I understood the issue you had there trying to stop and get away from hitting the children because it wasn't a very maneuverable car in a short distance. So you had to make a split-second decision. Jumping out, bailing out. Wow, that's nuts to do that. But you're still here today, and that was a choice you made at that time to save the children and also save yourself. And it might have put you on a different path if you hit that pole, or if you hit those children. There would have been two different paths.
Absolutely.
Jump out, and you took that injury and you drove forward. And I applaud you.
Thank you. I want to point something out about that. Just to clarify, when that happened, I mentioned how I was doing a lot of drinking. I was not impaired at that time. I had just gotten off work. I was still in my white uniform from the bakery. And when the accident happened, it was in the summertime. It was in July in Illinois. It was hot, humid. I was laying on the asphalt, and the asphalt was sticking to me, you know. I was trying to get up, and one of my neighbors says, Don't move, Joe. Don't move." An elderly Mexican lady, or she was Hispanic anyway, she came up to me and started praying for me in Spanish. And that's when I got nervous, right? And when the paramedics and cops got there, they're like, "Well, who's driving the car?" I said, "I was." They said, "That's impossible." They said, "The way you're laying in the street and the way the car is situated, if you were driving the car, it would have ran you over, without a doubt." And I said, "I have no reason to lie to you, sir. I was driving the car." It wasn't until my sister, one of my neighbors, ran up and grabbed my sister and her kids. It wasn't until she came down and she saw me laying in the street, and they kept asking me, and she goes, "He just left the house. He was by himself." You know, they just were not convinced. When I got to the ER, I was in there for like 3 hours. And then they were going to admit me. And then my youngest brother says, "Wait, what about that?" He pointed at my arm. And you have to remember, I'm all drugged up. I'm on morphine or whatever else they give you, you know, for traumatic, when you have a traumatic accident like that. So I wasn't really feeling any pain. But both my forearms and my legs, my shins, was all road rash with the tar and the pea gravel. So they started scrubbing my arms and my legs, and it felt like someone was taking like a steel wool pad. And so they had to grab a male CNA and my brother. They had to hold me down to do that. And I could feel that pain. You thinking I'm all drugged up, I ain't going to feel it? That was the most excruciating pain I ever felt. Anyway, yeah, I wanted to point that out. And, you know, it ain't the kids' fault they were playing in the street, you know. I know for myself, I couldn't live with myself if I would have hurt one of those kids. I could not have lived with myself. That would have been too much, right? So we all make decisions in life. Just like when I mentioned how I felt my relationship with my new wife was more important and had more significance and more value than the desire to drink. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. And so I'm grateful for, you know, that time in my life, because let me put it to you this way. Have you ever been lost, Rich? Let's say before GPS, have you ever been lost anywhere and you don't want to stop and ask for help?
As a man, I'm never lost. I'm just, misaligned.
Right. Okay. So, right. Well, I like that. We don't want to stop and ask for help.
That's right.
And the fact of the matter is, Rich, I was lost in life until I wasn't, until I said, enough is enough, until I said, I'm going to swallow my pride and I'm going to walk through those doors and I'm going to put in the work, And as I sit here tonight, am I perfect? Am I healed? No. That's a lifelong thing. But I've come a long way, and I'm going to continue to go as far as God takes me. But I'm grateful for the people in my life, my Navy buddies that I still keep in touch with. They encourage me. They're an inspiration. There's this well. It's a brotherhood, And so when I wrote that first book, and there was a period of time before I wrote the second book, because I didn't know that I wanted to write a second book. Because the truth of the matter is, writing that first book, let me say this, and I want to encourage everyone to do this. That first book initially was a journal. Now you say, why did you write a journal? It was because I was still dealing with some lingering effects from my childhood, and I was now a father. So I thought, why not write stuff down? So I did. And I would write story after story. And it wasn't until I decided to take it to my wife, who's a mental health nurse, and I would start reading stories to her. Now, this is the unique thing that happened. I read one particular story. Now, remember, when I wrote it down, I wasn't fazed by it. I didn't become emotional. I didn't become upset. There's a story in my first book about my stepfather who played Russian roulette with me.
Jeez.
All right. Because I quit my paper route because he didn't work. He kept taking my money and I had enough. So he played Russian roulette, pulled the trigger. I'm only in 5th grade. I pissed my pants, run downstairs and hide where I knew he can get me. But when I shared that story with her, when I read it out loud, the floodgates opened up. And I started crying like a baby. I'm not embarrassed to say that because this is what I discovered. There was healing in writing it down. There was healing in sharing it. And after a period of time, she was like, you know what, Joe, you should really write a book. It can help people. So that's been my motivation, to help people. Now, listen, it's taken a lot of courage. It's taken a lot of work. I put all my stuff out there because I want you, the listening audience, and whoever would take time to listen, to know that you're more than enough. There's a plan and a purpose for your life, that there's resources out there available when you are having suicidal ideations or you're having chemical dependency issues, addictions of one form or another. There's help available. And I'd like to see you find that help to find your purpose,
Heck yeah. That's what we try to do that with every show we do here on the Misfit Nation. Every show on the Misfit Nation, this is number 657. If you think 657, that's a huge number. But if we just helped one person per show, we reach one, teach one every show, that's 657 people that have had a better life because of someone on our show sharing something with them and showing them they can be a better person or they can find a way out of a hole and do things better. And that's exactly what you're doing here tonight, Joe.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate you and your team for what you guys are doing. And I love you guys for it. And the fact that, you guys are a brotherhood, all military, it's a beautiful thing, man. And I didn't mention this on the onset, but I thank you for your service and your team. Pass that on, please. We don't give our veterans enough credit, man. I mean, whenever I see an opportunity to thank a vet, I break my neck. to make it a point to tell them thank you. And that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, listen, you didn't go into the military because you had to. I didn't go into the Navy because I had to. At the time, I thought it was the best option. I invested 6 years of my life. And I wish I could take things back, but I can't. Am I glad I did it? Absolutely, positively. I'll tell you a funny story, Rich. I don't know what your position is on this, but there's a law, like the national anthem, I salute. And somebody asked me, why are you saluting the flag? I go, why ain't you? But as a veteran, I have that right and that prerogative. And that's, although my obligation to the military is over, but my oath isn't, if that makes sense.
100%. I think everyone that's listening that's a veteran or first responder has that same feeling. Lacey on the Tuesday crew, he is a very patriotic dude, and the national anthem gets those little goosebumps going on him as they do on me. And it's like you're a little kid, and you feel that adrenaline go through you when the national anthem starts. You feel the butterflies in your stomach because you know it's going to be a great rendition, or whoever's playing it. It's always a great time to listen to our national anthem. And coming up here in a few weeks, it's our nation's 250th birthday. No matter where you sit on the fence of politics or whatever belief, it's still our nation's 250th birthday. Be proud of where you are. Be proud of the country.
That's right.
And that's what we're all about here.
And I think we need to be more mindful for our vets in harm's way right now in the Middle East and in Europe.
Yes, sir.
We take them for granted. At least a lot of people do. And people forget the sacrifices they're making on a daily basis. So I'm going to thank all of the troops everywhere. My second book, Unshackled, The Story of Redemption and Renewal, if I can just talk to you about the title of the book, the working title. When I say unshackled, I just want to talk about that for a quick minute. If you can imagine being bound up or being tied up, you can't break free. I was shackled to that PTSD. Technically, I had CPTSD. I was shackled to depression, to anxiety, right? But because what I shared with you guys earlier, I put in the work, and I continued to put in the work to become unshackled from the PTSD, from the anxiety, from the depression. And because of that, I mentioned about that my relationship with God, I found redemption through him, through Jesus Christ, in terms of my sin condition and, my standing with him. But there's another part of when I say redemption, because when I was really out there screwing up my life, when I was still in Rockford and I lost the duplex and, I was working through temp services, but I couldn't pay the bills. And eventually I was out on the streets. It put a strain on certain relationships with my siblings. But after I put in the work and I began to rebuild my life, I was also able to redeem the time with my siblings, in particular my sister, who was my hero. My first book was dedicated to her, and she wrote the foreword to the second book. And I only have one sister, and as long as I can remember, she's always been the glue that's held the family together, and that's been huge for me. And when I reference the word renewal, I mentioned how as a kid I was beaten, I was locked in the basement, I was called names. Rich, if you have children, you call them an idiot, a moron, you're just like, let's say you have a stepchild. You're just like your father, you idiot. After a particular point in time, that kid starts believing that, right? The self-esteem goes away. And I never forget when my stepdad said to me one day, he goes, "You're going to be just like me. You're going to be just like me." I didn't know what he was talking about. He smoked and he drank alcohol like a fish. He drank a fifth of E&J brandy every day. I didn't know what he meant. But guess what? I did become a lot like him in terms of an alcoholic. And but that cycle's been broken, you know, and that renewal piece, and this is huge for me, man. I was so afraid of having kids of my own as because of something called learned behavior, right? For instance, your father disciplined you a certain way, your father talked to you a certain way or treated you a certain way. Chances are you do that to your kids because that's what you're taught. And based on that alone, solely on that, I didn't want to have kids. So when we found out we're going to become parents, probably a year and a half after we got married, as strange as this sounds, Rich, I began to have dreams and nightmares of what I went through as a kid. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it, but it was so real, so vivid, and it just overtook my life. And I remember I'm a Christian, you know, God has forgiven me and I put my trust in him and things are going really good. But this one thing is still hanging on. It's called unforgiveness. This is huge, you guys. Forgiveness is huge. So after a couple weeks, maybe more like a month of going through this pattern, God, not in an audible voice, but in my head and in my heart, he said to me, I have forgiven you. Who are you not to forgive? And one particular night, I was laying in bed, just kind of relaxing. My wife was downstairs. I made the conscious choice to forgive my mother and my biological father. Now, look, they never came to me and said sorry. They never tried to make amends. They never said, hey, let's start over. No, they didn't do any of that. But it was like 1,000,000 pounds lifted off my chest, and it set me free. Now, there's another part to this forgiveness that's more important. So finding the ability to forgive those people does not mean I can trust them again, or I want a relationship with my stepfather again, or that, you know, I can trust him or whatever. But I can forgive. And I was able to do that. Anyway, the biggest part of all, I think, is I found the ability to forgive myself. Now you're saying, Rich, you might say, what do you mean? I'll give you an example. I'm not the most handy person. The kitchen sink is leaking. Trying to fix the leak. I go to the hardware store, buy a repair kit, change it out. Guess what? The next morning it's leaking. So I start beating myself up over it. After 4 or 5 trips to the hardware store, I finally got it figured out. But I'm upset with myself. I should have got this figured out after the first try. Just beating myself up mentally, emotionally. And I'll never forget what my wife said. She goes, you know something, Joe? I can never be as hard on you as you are on yourself. And that's from my childhood. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I've learned to forgive myself when I fall short, when I make a mistake, because I can promise you and your audience, we will continue to make mistakes, and it's okay. The world's not going to end because of your little mistake, but we need to learn to forgive ourselves. And when we learn to forgive ourselves, it's like a whole new world. Can you relate to that?
100%. I think if people start understanding that you are the biggest judge of yourself, the mirror is who judges you the most. All the other noise out there doesn't really matter because you're the one who judges yourself the most, the hardest, the most vicious. You treat yourself the worst. Once you get to understand that, you can breathe easier. Jake mentioned 2 things to go along with what you've been saying. When you talked about the saluting the flag, he said he always salutes the flag during the anthem. And then he said it just now, once he started forgiving people in his life, he could actually start sleeping and move on. And it goes back to what you said probably 15 minutes ago about them living rent free in your head. When you let them live in your head rent free, you're not angry at your anger at them does nothing to them. So if you forgive them it gets that pressure off your chest. It gets the pressure off your head. You can then do that with like the woo-saw stuff from the cop shows. They talk about woo-saw with Mike and them on the show, Will Smith and them. They talk about the woo-saw pulling the ears. You just woo-saw just by saying, you know what, I forgive you. Because one, now they're out of your head, and you're no longer letting them pay rent in your head for free, and you can drive on with your life, and that's the best thing.
Yes, yes, sir. And you know something else, Rich? In terms of the renewal, I was talking about how there's something called learned behavior. You know, we all have a choice, but chances are, and statistically saying, or from what I've read, most people will treat their kids the way they were treated. I'm here to tell you, I broke that cycle.
Good.
And listen, I can lose my job tomorrow, my house next week, my car, whatever. Been there, done that. But you're not taking away my legacy. And what's my legacy? My 2 sons. And the you know, they do not know what it's like to be locked in a room or to be homeless, to go without food, to be belittled, to be hassled, to be bullied. And that's my legacy, period, point blank. Now, I say that to say this. Had I not put in the work, had I not been honest with myself, had I not, let's be real here, had I not gone into the military for some guidance and some direction in life, I would have been buried up or locked up a long time ago.
Definitely. And I'm sure there's a large percentage of our brothers and sisters who served that can say that same sentence.
Yeah.
They did not make that path choice. The road less traveled, 1% of America joins the military. If they did not take that turn and join, where would they be today? What would have happened? And that's something that you got to think about. And while we're thinking, we have 3 questions from the audience that have popped in. I want to pop them in here so you have a chance to at least interact with them and answer some of their questions. The first one is from Nancy Jane Truist. Joe, looking back now, what was the moment when you realized you couldn't keep living the way you were living? And what actually made you choose to change over comfort? Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate the question. I would have to say probably after I got married, my drinking got heavy there for a while, and my wife gave me a choice. Either get help or we're done. And that was kind of a scary thing because as a kid, we were homeless as a family, living in a battered women's shelter. My family, my mom, dad, stepdad, the household was fueled by alcohol and other drugs. And I didn't want to lose that relationship. I didn't want to lose everything. I didn't want to lose my life because of the choices I made while drinking or because I drink. And I just said to myself, there's got to be something better. There's something better, right? There has to be. And, you know, what I talked to you about before, Rich, about when you get lost, you know, a guy ain't going to ask for help. I was lost in life for a long time. I didn't want to ask for help until I did. And so I think that's the key part too. You don't have to do it alone. There's people willing to help you. Like I'm a part of NAMI here in this area, National Alliance of Mental Illness. It's the largest grassroots organization of its kind. It's a peer-to-peer led organization. And last Saturday, not yesterday, but last Saturday, I'm the team chaplain. So they had a mental health day, and they allowed me to raffle off my book. So people would buy raffle tickets with a chance to leave the stadium with one of my books. And all the money that I raised, I gave to NAMI in order to help them to continue to doing their work and to making a difference. They don't, you know, it's like you, Rich. You guys don't have to do what you're doing, but I appreciate you and your team for everything you do, man, because you guys see there's an issue, right? And you're bringing it out to the forefront the world can hear and see how people have dealt with life on life's terms and turned their lives around. Do I have answers to all the questions in life? No. As I said earlier, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. The analogy I like to use is I am who I am. And by the grace of God, there I be. You know, I'm like that clump of clay on the potter's wheel being formed and shaped into the man God's called me to be. I hope that answers her question.
I hope so too. Go on to the next one. This one is from someone like Xylitol Mint. When you were struggling, what was the biggest lie you believed about yourself, and how did you eventually break free from it? Thank you, Xylitol.
Oh, that's a deep one.
Yeah.
The simple answer, the short answer, I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve to have nice things. If that makes sense. There was a time there I played the victim too, right? I felt sorry for myself. And I think the breaking point again was when I moved to Dubuque, and I knew I had to make a change. There's this saying, it goes something like this: you have to have the want to, right? Like you can say, Rich, you can tell me, hey, I'm going to school for my doctorate. You know, I have an opportunity to go to school and do this and do that. I have this opportunity to do this huge podcast. It's going to blow up, you know, but you have to have the want to. You have to have the desire. They're not going to do it for you. You got to put in the work, right? So I guess I think there was a minuscule of hope left in me. And I didn't mention this before, but after being out of active duty, you know, I was doing my 1 week in a month reserve time in Chicago. I did that for 1 year. And then I had 2 years in active reserves where it didn't have to go anywhere. Then my aunt passed away, my Aunt Grace, who was more like a mother to me. I made a promise to her when she was sick. And she said to me, she goes, do better than your dad. Don't do what your dad did. And that kind of haunted me because my dad, he was a literal hobo. He would actually jump freight trains to go from like this area to Milwaukee, to Omaha, to Denver. Very dangerous, right? He would live in these rescue missions, work at day labor to make enough money to get the next drink or the next buzz. And then he'll wear his welcome and he'll go to the next town, do the same thing. Well, after my aunt died, my drinking didn't stop, just got worse. I would drink because of her dying. And I found myself homeless, just like my dad. So we had that common denominator. And when my wife, going back, I don't mean to keep bringing this up, but I'm trying to bring this home. When she says it's either me or the booze, that's when the light came on. You know, I snapped out of it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's that pleasant kick in the chest that wakes you up and tells you something. And for that, it was the words. The words were like arrows coming at you and telling you that. You said something earlier about you have to have the want to. You have to have the want to. And it goes back to the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
You can give a man a fish, he won't. But if you teach a man a fish, he'll learn to eat, healthy, live.
Yes.
Have food for life. Those both things come out there. And we said it all the time here for people going through the darkness and going through suffering and going through addiction. You can say you have a problem all you want, but you have to want to stop that problem in order to get help you. And once you find that light switch that tells you, hey, this is what I need to do. All these people are yelling it and I'm not hearing it because I don't want it. But sometimes it's when you have to say, let me turn this light on. it's time to get out of this darkness and drive forward, because I want to live a little longer. I want to give back to the people around me. I want to be here for people. That's when it all comes together.
Beautifully said, Rich. That was awesome.
Thank you.
And look, we all have a story, right?
Yeah.
By no way, you guys, am I saying that, my story is any worse than yours.
No.
But what I am saying is, in my story, you read about a person who was tenacious. It's written a gritty, raw, honest way that took a ton of courage. But what I try to convey is, and I mentioned this earlier a couple of times, your condition does not have to be your conclusion. When I wrote the first book, Rich, I probably cried a river writing that first book. Writing the second book, I cried an ocean. And you say, why? Well, like I said, a few years had lapsed in between the books. After the first book, I thought I was done. When you're putting yourself out there like that, I'm not saying I regret it, because I absolutely do not regret it. If any people can go to Amazon and look at the reviews, the book has helped people. Both books have. And so I believe it served its purpose. But I'm kind of contemplating the third book, which would be poetry, just poetry. I lost my train of thought. If you fall down 5 times, get up 6. Never quit. Never give up. And, I talked to you before about, if you never heal from past trauma, you will bleed on those who never cut you. What do I mean by that? Well, I shared with you some of the trauma I endured, right? As a kid. And, believe this or not, I still got scars from some of the beatings I took as a kid. It's a reminder, right? But it was those emotional scars that I carried for decades, right? That did the most damage. You're more than enough. In spite of what you endured, your value is unmeasurable, if that makes sense. In spite of what maybe you were told as a kid, or from a spouse, or maybe a co-worker, I'm here to say that don't believe the lie. You're good enough. You're more than good enough. You're valuable. Your person you can't be bought, right? And there's only one of you. So believe in yourself. Forgive yourself when you do fall short. And this is a big thing too. And Rich, you guys do this. Come along the person who's struggling, and be a shoulder they can cry on. Let that person open up to you. Someone says to me, well, what do you tell people to do that, are looking to get some help? One of the first things I would tell people is to confide in someone that you can trust, whether that's your pastor, maybe a co-worker, maybe your wife, maybe your husband, maybe a brother or a sister, and just open up and get that stuff off of your chest, right? And the next step I would suggest is going to your pastor, or going to a counselor. As men, Rich, and I think you would agree with this, to go get help, see a therapist, there's a stigma about mental health, right? Men don't willingly say, yeah, I have depression. Yeah, I have anxiety, and I'm taking these pills for it. There's a stigma, and we need to break that stigma. So for 5 years, I was on a podcast called Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. She was a licensed therapist out of Florida, and unfortunately, around 3 years ago, she died suddenly of a heart attack. But during the 5 years we worked together, our main focus was breaking the stigma on mental health and providing resources and coming alongside people and let them know that you can get through this. And that's what I want to say to you, is that no matter what you may be facing in your life today, nothing is so bad that you have to, first of all, give up on life, throw in the towel, because you know what? We need you. We want you, and we love you in a special way. Number two, your family needs you. And there's more to life. And that's my hope and prayer that you will find that if indeed, something you're struggling with.
Definitely.
And lastly, real quick, Rich, there's no shame in saying I need help. No, there's no shame at all.
That's right. And I think over the last the 20 plus years since Quat started, a whole new generation of veterans came out, and we've seen what our brothers or fathers or uncles or grandfathers, when they came home from Korea, Vietnam, and the skirmishes between Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm, they didn't get help at all. And Vietnam, especially, they were spit on. They were told that nothing was wrong with them, just go back to work. And what they did, they went back to work, but they never got help.
Right.
What they did do was help behind the scenes. They got with the BFW, they got with the DAV, they got with the American Legion, and they used them to advocate to get help, the help that we're getting now. And it's now within brigades, within battalions, there's mental health professionals, there's physical therapists, there's things that they push on the soldier, the Marine, the sailor, the airman, the Space Force, the space cadets, to get the help before it's too late, before it mounts up on like a mountain on you. And I think all the struggles that we all went through pales in comparison to what Vietnam veterans did and Korean War veterans. But our brothers, our younger brothers and sisters now coming out, they should have no issue going out and getting that help and being strong, whole people as they come out. The whole mind, body, and spirit should be well intact as long as they use the available resources that are right there, and they're right on their doorstep now.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Since you brought it up, you guys are doing a lot of great things to help veterans out, but on a bigger scale, what do you think is the root cause of a lot of these veterans, these homeless veterans?
Becoming homeless?
Yeah. Do you think it's drug?
It's combinations of things.
Mental? I believe it's both.
I believe it's a combination thereof. It's mental health issues, or some of them don't want to be around people anymore after being in bad situations. They don't want to get close to people.
PTSD.
They remove themselves from that equation, and they make themselves into those homeless camps, or some of them really go off grid, completely homeless. And it takes talking to each one of them to find out the pattern. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor.
Well, can I share something with you, Rich? PTSD, when I was 18, I didn't know the name for it. I didn't really know what the name for depression was or anxiety. I just knew I had it, right? I want to tell you a story about how powerful PTSD can be in the negative. If I could, I'll be quick. So I was on the USS Kitty Hawk. I mentioned before I worked on the flight deck. Well, they're in the Westpac, and then all the ready-up cruises after that, I was on the flight deck. And then I got a job in below decks. So my job was I was a pump room operator, filter room operator. So on one particular day in March, there was a fire on Sponson 11 on the hangar bay on the Kitty Hawk, starboard side. It just so happens I was below that and more, aft. I was aft of the fire, or downwind from the fire a little bit, but at the time I didn't realize that. So we spent thousands. I was in the Persian Gulf. Iran-Iraq war was going on. We are always at GQ all the time. You got to secure the hatches. So when they announced the fire, I secured the hatch. I'm in the filter room, and I was a firefighter, import firefighter for a long time. And when it came to fighting fires, the Navy does not play around. You can't run from a fire at sea, right? So the Navy was really efficient at putting out fires. I didn't know if somebody attacked us or a plane was on fire. I didn't know. So I'm in the filter room on comms. The control's not telling us anything. All of a sudden, this is how PTSD works. This is how it did for me. All of a sudden, I had this flashback. When I was a kid, my stepfather, he was a big man, 6'5", 350. He would typically leave the house 2 to 3 nights a week. Me and my brothers had a bedroom in the basement. We had a toilet in the basement, a TV in the basement. And he would keep us locked in the basement, right? Until it was time for dinner or time for our bath. He'd let us up and then lock us back down there. Well, he had a pattern of going out to the city for hours on end. My mom would be at work and we'd be locked in the basement. And we had no way of escaping if there was ever a fire. So that was my biggest fear. If there was ever a fire, how are we going to live? How are we going to escape? So anyway, that flashback reared its ugly head. And I think it was just waiting for the right opportunity to show up again. So what happened was there's an active fire above where I was working. And this memory flared up and I was frozen with fear. It was the most bizarre thing ever. I didn't know what to do. I snapped out of it after a couple of minutes, but that's just how crazy PTSD can be, right?
Yeah. And each person it affects differently. So it depends what your trauma point was and what brings on the PTSD and what affects you the most. What things outside of your control make those things are triggers to you. And each one of us is different. Each one of us has a different trigger. Some might be the same, but it might be at different levels. So it's very hard to judge or, I guess, put into words what each person does. But every one of us has something that triggers it. And for you, having that response underway, and like you said, the Navy, you have to save the ship. And that's why they're very efficient. And especially when the Kitty Hawk, you're a floating city. It's a lot of stuff on the Kitty Hawk or any aircraft carrier. And the Kitty Hawk it pales in comparison to the size of the ships now, I think. So that would be like the little brother to one of the guys, not one of the ships now, but still, it's a floating city. The aircraft carrier is a floating city, and you'd probably never met everyone on there. You've probably seen them. You've probably seen those who were in your berthing area, and maybe the guys and gals you worked with. But
I'll tell you a funny story, Rich.
Good.
I was in V4. Our berthing was on the 03 level. And my rack, they put the new guys, there's 3 bunks. You go into a little cubicle, there's 6 bunks, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Straight ahead, there's a cubicle for your uniforms to be hung up. And there are coffin beds, you probably have seen those, right? You lift up the lid. Yeah. So our berthing was directly below the arresting gear wires. So every time a plane would land, it was like a controlled crash. Thank God for the Walkman. I never did get used to that.
Wow.
Every few seconds, it's like, what did I sign up for? I want to tell you this real cool story, though, if I could, to wrap it up. In terms of the book, before I talked about redeeming the time with certain people. In this instance, my sister, the relationship got strained because of the choices I made, but over the process of time, I was able to rebuild that relationship. She got divorced and got remarried, but she asked me to give her away, right? And that was huge in my life. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. It was like a movie. At the wedding, we got married in her yard. It was July 3rd. I'm walking her up the aisle. I give her away to her husband. The minister goes through the whole process or whatever. And at the end of the thing, he goes, let me introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Cliff Hill. Right at that very moment, behind where they're standing, fireworks went off, the citywide fireworks, like what you see in a movie, right? It was so dramatic. It's like, it was so cool. And everyone was on and on the fireworks that went on for like 12 minutes. But for me, what that represented for me at that very moment was being unshackled. It was a reminder to me that there is freedom, there is life, there is purpose, even after all I'd been through, after all the things I did, all the mistakes. There's something called second chances. And I'm still grateful for second chances at life.
You gotta just keep taking advantage of those second chances and move forward and keep driving. And that's the best thing. I think you shared that in almost every answer you said tonight. The getting out of your own way and moving forward, and that's what you've done. That's what you've done through writing your book, sharing your story, opening up those wounds so everyone can see what you went through, and sharing. And that's what helps others, not just keeping our stories bottled up. So we thank you for sharing that with the Misfit Nation tonight. Joe, what is the best way for the Misfit Nation to get in contact with you?
Sure. So I have a website, joepotosi.com. I can be reached that way. Also, I'm on Facebook, Joe Potosi, Instagram, Joe_Potosi, and I think that's all my social media.
Awesome. I'm sharing those links in the chat right now for those who are watching right now, watching us live, and they will be in the show notes for those when it comes on audio later. So make sure you check those out and get in touch with Joe and pick his brain like we did tonight, and like the audience was able to ask him some questions and get deep in there with him. So thank you, Joe, for sharing and being vulnerable tonight.
Thank you, Rich, for this opportunity. And again, thank you and your team for everything you guys have done and continue to do. And I'm so grateful that I found you guys.
I appreciate it.
Because to be honest, I try to get up to speed. I watched some of your episodes, kind of see what you guys are about a while back. And I really like these guys. You guys are doing some great things, man. And listen, you might not subscribe to what I'm going to say, but this is what I feel from the bottom of my heart. Little, now you might think Misfit Nation isn't little, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's where you want it to be. But little is great if God is in it. Now, what do I mean by that? Layman's terms, what I'm trying to convey is, if what you're doing is for the right intentions, the right purposes, the right motivation, and the right end result that you're hoping for, it will flourish. Does that make sense? That's what I believe.
That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that with us. Misfit Nation, make sure you reach out to Joe, joepotosi.com, Joe Potosi on Facebook, Joe Potosi on Instagram. His website probably has all those links as well, so you don't have to go to 3 different locations. I think it's all right on the top and bottom of his website. I believe I've seen them. But Joe, thanks again for hanging out with us tonight. And Misfit Nation, please listen to everything you said tonight. And if you're going into that darkness tonight, tomorrow, remember, there's people out there that care about you. People that are out there that want you here. You will be missed. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Absolutely.
A day tomorrow with you is 100% better than one without you. Please pick up that phone. Call those 3 names that are in your wallet. Those are the names that are closest to you. You should call them anyway. Call them, let them know you're in trouble. They'll be there for you. If you don't want to call them, dial 988. Follow the prompts. Get the help you need. If all that doesn't help, contact us. info@themisfitnation.com, jake@themisfitnation.com, or steven@themisfitnation.com. We will get you on the line. We'll keep you on the line until someone local can take care of you and make sure you're all right and you're here with us into the future. Until next time, Misfit Nation, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation Show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.